right, it's our favorite time of the month. It's when the three mystical fates check in with us to look into their all-seeing eye to say what happened to some of our favorite characters. This month, they're going to tackle the Powerpuff Girls. And let's face it, we all know the song. I forgot the song. Fighting crime, trying to save the world. Doesn't it figure when the camera's on I can't sing? I mean, I've been singing it nonstop. They've been wanting to stab me in the face. So, what happened to the Powerpuff Girls in the future? We're going to kick it off with the first one, Blossom. She was always the popular one. She was born to be a leader. But once she graduated from Poky Oaks Elementary, she found her popularity waning as Bubbles finally crooned her own as the uber hottie. Suddenly, no one cared much about Blossom. As the girls transitioned into high school, things only got worse for her. She got completely lost in Bubble's shadow. She couldn't even turn to Buttercup. So she turned to some new friends like the Gangrene Gang. Blossom stopped fighting crime and started causing it. She took over the Gangrene Gang and reformed it into the bad society. She got so lost in the underworld that she became Townsville's most wanted and Bubbles' archenemy. After dropping out of high school and causing the great destruction of Townsville, Bubbles finally bested her, and now she's in jail. In jail, Blossom became a kingpin, sending many dark nights plotting revenge against the one she blamed for everything, the Professor. The great jailbreak happened one summer afternoon. Blossom slipped out under the cover of the chaos, and she went back to her home, the place she grew up, and lost it all as easily. The Professor has gotten on in his years and didn't put up much of a fight. He was dead before anyone really knew what was going on. With the Professor's blood in her hands, Blossom finally lost every last bit of sanity she was trying to cling to. The following fight with Bubbles and Buttercup would be her last. There was no memorial, there was no service. Blossom's body was burnt to a crisp and all remains were locked away in a high-security facility, just in case. Buttercup was always the misunderstood one of the group. She marched to a different beat. Graduating at the top of her class from Poky Oaks, it was a turning point for her. In middle school, Buttercup, once again became her own. She watched as Bubbles blossomed into every man's dream and Blossom turned into a psychopath. At home, Buttercup was always overlooked as the middle child. Everything revolved around Bubbles and Blossom caused more problems than she was worth. So Buttercup ran away and gave up the hero gig. She made her way to the big city, Citiesville, and became an apprentice under Sedusa, reformed and now a major fashion designer. She graduated high school and met the man of her dreams on a blind date set up by her own new boss, Sedusa, who was also her best friend now. They had a beach wedding and Buttercup was living the perfect life. She had the kids, a dog, a white picket fence. She never looked back on her hero days. She never looked into the fame of Bubbles, and she never looked into the terror that became Blossom. But it always kind of nagged at the back of her head. Until one night, Bubbles shows up at her door to tell her their dad was dead, and at Blossom's hands no less. Buttercup revived her superhero powers and went to fight her fallen sister to the death. And after the ashes had been stored securely, Buttercup and Bubbles reunite to this day to remain the closest of sisters. Well, let's talk about Bubbles now. She was always the cute one, and boy, did she ever grow into that cuteness. As part of the Chemical X experiment, the after effects, Bubbles blossomed into a woman early. Hotter than a supermodel and more than any League of Heroes, Bubbles became the one to know. She was a star. Sadly, as she entered high school, she also became self-absorbed. She didn't see what was happening to her sisters. All she cared about was the hot date with Boomer, the star football player. And as Bubbles puts it, a totally awesome surfer. The Professor dotes on Bubbles every day, who signs national contracts for endorsements for her superhero career. The petty criminals of Townsville become the dangerous thugs of Bubbles' future. After high school, Bubbles attempts to go to college, but the world is always in need of saving, especially from her evil sister Blossom. The two clash many times until Blossom all but destroys Townsville. After the fight, Bubbles realizes how consumed with herself she has been and also realizes Buttercup has been missing for a really long time. Like, where did she go? So she discovers where Buttercup is at, and seeing her happy, Bubbles decides to fix her life. She scales back on the glitz and the glam, focusing on being a good superhero when the Professor is killed by Blossom. She goes and enlists Buttercup aid and puts Blossom down. She then marries her longtime lover Boomer, and the sons become the new rowdy rough boys as good heroes, and Bubbles is allowed to retire as her sons take up her helm of being a hero. The Professor. He has always been busy creating. He made the Powerpuff Girls after a while to fill the need of a void in his life, but he could never feel his need for companionship. He lost himself to dating sites and singles mingles, and the girls basically raised themselves. When Bubbles started to make it big, the money and women were in ample supply, so his life became that of managing Bubbles. It was everything he wanted. Everything else was sacrificed. As the years went on, he lost his charm and Bubbles became more independent and didn't really need him. When all the girls were out of the house, the professor became a recluse and began to secretly make items for Blossom out of misguided grief. When he had a stroke, he reevaluated his life. It was time to clean it up, and he even tried dating Miss Bellum until he discovered her dark, dark secret. Years of mad science did age him horribly, and before he knew it, he was alone, wishing he could have done things differently. He missed his girls, and he wished they could go back to being young again. Thought he maybe should have written down somewhere. But one day, Blossom came to finish him off. He looked at her and apologized for everything he had ever did to them. He told her his deeper secret. He was already dying. Blossom and the professor spent the night like it was the old days, and they reminisced, they played games, they looked through photo albums, and in the morning, they watched the sunrise before the professor died in her arms. Whereas the mayor now, we're on him. He was always a crackpot. I mean, let's face it, he was obsessed with pickles. And when he finally made a move on Miss Bellum, he discovered a dark secret. She had him committed to the asylum where him was housed. Being so close to him made the mayor go nuts, and he eventually kills himself with a pickle. No one knew how the mayor even got that damn pickle, and to this day it's still a mystery. The pickle is on display in Townsville Museum of Natural History as one of the 7 wonders of the world. After his death, the truth about the mayor was discovered. He had fingers in all the money pots of the underworld crime rings. He was single-handedly funding the import of terrorist weapons into America and finding new ways to release all the villains from the jail every time they were thrown into it. The mayor only pretended to be a crackpot. In reality, he was the godfather. Now it's time to look at Miss Bellum. She was always a mystery. How could someone so hot always be single? It's because she had a deep, deep, dark secret. One that when someone got too close and discovered would wind up dead or insane. Except the professor. He was already kind of insane as it was. He was the only one not repulsed by the fact that she was really a man! Yeah, big surprise, Bellum's a man. Cross-dressing man, whatever. After the mayor was committed, Bellum went out into the world as a Peace Corps member and is currently training drag queens in Russia. She is currently touring the country looking for the next top Russian drag queen as part of a reality search. The search is not going too well as Russian men do not make good women. After a lifetime of success, Bellum decides to finally settle down and raise pugs on a dog ranch in Indonesia. Her pugs become the most valued in all the world, and Bellum becomes very, very rich. And last but not least, we look at Mojo Jojo. Once the ultimate threat discovered his intelligence came with a price, an operable brain tumor that killed him too soon. It's rumored he haunts the newly remodeled volcano-based theater, though. So that's what's happened to our favorite little pint-sized heroes from Townsville. Join us next month when we go into something even more sick and twisted as the Desk of the Fates, because apparently the Fates just have a really bad sense of humor.